Welcome back to the deep dive. We take the source material you provided, articles, research notes, industry papers, and we give you the strategic knowledge you need fast. Today, we are diving into what is really the true moment of truth for any protection plan. The claim. We spend so much time on, the needs assessment, the pricing, selecting the right product, but our sources all hammer home this one essential truth. The claims process is the single moment that defines whether all that work actually worked.
It is. I mean, if that safety net fails when it's needed most, then the whole exercise was, well, unfortunately, a bit moot.
Exactly.
And what's so critical for you to understand is the profound emotional weight of this event. Protection claims. They almost always arrive at a client's absolute worst moment.
Yeah.
We're talking about bereavement, a sudden terrifying illness, or just deep financial worry. The advisor's role here, it's not just technical. It's not just processing.
Oh.
It's about providing steady guidance, clarity, and honestly, just true human care. So that all that technical work from the past meets this immediate crisis.
And that's why it's so often cited as the most meaningful work an advisor does. You're actively transferring this huge financial risk away from a client who is just completely unequipped to cope at that moment. Okay, let's unpack this. A client, or maybe their family, calls. They're often distressed, reporting an event. What is that mandatory, that really sensitive first step?
So the very first step is, I'd call it organizational triage.
Triage, okay.
You have to communicate calmly, establish the basic facts, confirm the specific policy type, is this life, critical illness, income protection, and then identify the insurer.
Right.
And crucially, the advisor has to pull up and review that policy schedule immediately. You're confirming what they bought and who they bought it from before you do anything else.
That sounds absolutely essential because, as you said, clients are vulnerable and probably have zero clarity on what they're even entitled to.
That's the crucial knowledge gap you have to fill. I mean, clients can swing wildly between assuming the policy is some magic wand that covers everything.
Yeah, I can see that.
Or, on the other hand, they completely underestimate the benefits they're owed. The advisor's job is to translate all that policy jargon into simple, compassionate language.
So you're clarifying the cover, the criteria.
Exactly. The criteria that must be met, and just a simple outline of the process. You are the interpreter of the small print at the exact moment they need it most.
So after that initial, very sensitive conversation, we pivot to documentation, the paperwork. Our sources consistently flag this as the #1 bottleneck for delays. What kind of specific evidence are we talking about here?
Well, the requirements vary dramatically. For, say, a standard life insurance claim, it's relatively straightforward.
Okay.
Usually the death certificate is the central piece of evidence. But for critical illness or CI, the hurdle is much, much higher. You need really robust medical reports, a definitive diagnosis from a consultant.
Not just a GP.
No, absolutely not. It needs to specifically reference the clinical findings. And then you have income protection, or IP, which is by far the most complex.
Because it's ongoing, right? The claim isn't just a one-off event.
Precisely. IP insurers need a constant stream of information. So that's not just the initial proof of incapacity, but also detailed occupational history, historical earnings records, and often confirmation from the employer about absence or reduced hours. The practical insight here is that the advisor's own diligence in reviewing these documents before they go in, that is paramount.
So it's a quality control step.
It is. We so often see delays just caused by, incomplete forms, inconsistent dates, or medical notes that talk about a secondary condition that just distracts the claims assessor. The advisor's job is to preemptively smooth that path.
So they're not just a mail drop. They're actively managing the information to stop the insurer from coming back with a dozen questions. Okay, now let's shift focus to the advisor's role as the intermediary, the advocate.
Hey.
Our sources describe this really well, I think, as clearing the path for the client.
It's a great way to put it. They're removing that administrative burden so the client can just focus on their recovery or their family.
And it's more than just chasing, I assume?
Oh, much more. They become the single communication hub. They follow up with the claims team. They help clarify complex medical info for the insurer, and they're authorized to escalate things if delays get unreasonable.
And that authorization is key, I imagine.
It's vital. Of course, this all requires clear, written client authorization, especially when you're sharing sensitive medical data. But by doing that, by centralizing all that complexity, the advisor lets the client focus their energy where it's needed.
Now, we've all heard stories about insurers investigating a policy years after it was taken out. Our sources flag this as the most misunderstood part of the process. So here's where it gets really interesting. Why do they do that? Why go back in time 5, 10 years to check validity?
It's basically twofold. First, the insurer has a legal and a fiduciary duty to all their policyholders and their shareholders to make sure the policy was set up legitimately and the claim is valid.
Okay, so it's a fairness thing.
It is. They're checking if the information given at the application was accurate. And second, this is the moment where the thoroughness of the original underwriting process is really put to the test.
And the major friction point that often comes up during this investigation is non-disclosure.
Absolutely. Non-disclosure is the most common reason for a decline, or even just a reduced payout. And this isn't just about, intentionally hiding something.
Right. It can be accidental.
It can be accidental omission, or what's sometimes called innocent misrepresentation, where the client they genuinely forgot about a minor symptom or a doctor's visit from years ago. The crucial test the insurer applies is something called materiality.
That's a great technical point. What defines materiality here?
Materiality asks us a simple question. Had the insurer known this specific fact, let's say a history of migraines or a past sports injury, at the time of application, would they have offered the same cover on the same terms?
Or at all?
Or at all. If that piece of information was material to the risk assessment, its omission, even if it was accidental, could potentially invalidate the policy.
Wow.
This is why that application stage requires such painstaking honesty, no matter how trivial a little health detail might seem. The diligence you do then directly impacts the outcome now.
So that earlier work really does ensure the claim runs smoothly later on. Okay, let's talk timelines. Once that investigation is done, the client just wants to know when the money will arrive. Our sources suggest the complexity really varies by product.
It does, massively.
Right.
Life insurance claims, assuming the documents are clean and the policy's valid, can often be processed in days or maybe a few weeks.
That's pretty quick.
It is. But critical illness and income protection, they are a different beast entirely. They need detailed, ongoing medical assessments to confirm the condition actually meets the policy's definitions. And that just takes time.
Which brings us to the importance of those definitions, the severity thresholds. I think this is where a lot of clients get tripped up. It's not enough to say you had a serious illness.
Not at all. It has to be the specific illness defined in the contract. Take critical illness. Simply having a heart problem? That's insufficient. The policy requires proof that the event meets the highly specific clinical definition of a heart attack in the wording. That often means detailing evidence of specific enzyme releases or certain ECG changes.
And with income protection, the definition of incapacity is everything.
It is paramount. Is it an own occupation policy, which means you can't perform your specific job?
Okay.
Or is it an any occupation policy, which means you have to be unable to do any job that you're suited for based on your education and experience?
That own occupation versus any occupation distinction sounds massive. I mean, that could dictate the entire success of a long-term claim.
It absolutely does. And furthermore, IP claims often involve assessing something called residual capacity.
What's that?
The insurer might determine you can't do your old job fully, but maybe you could work part-time or in an adapted role. The benefit payment is then adjusted to reflect that. Understanding these complex definitions is a key part of the advisor's technical role here.
So these rules aren't just arbitrary roadblocks.
Not at all. They exist to maintain fairness and the integrity of the pooled risk for everybody who holds a policy.
So what happens in the most challenging scenario? After all that advocacy and effort, the claim is declined. What are the main reasons for that, and what's the advisor's role in delivering that news?
Well, declines generally fall into one of those three categories we've touched on. One, the definition wasn't met. So the heart event wasn't severe enough to meet the policy wording.
Okay.
Two, the event happened outside the policy scope. Or three, material non-disclosure was found during the investigation.
And when that happens, the advisor has to.
The advisor has to carefully scrutinize the insurer's reasoning. Their job isn't to overrule the insurer, but it is to make sure the client fully understands the rationale and that the decision was based on accurate facts and the correct policy wording.
And if the client genuinely believes the decision is unjust or just based on an error, what's the next step?
The advisor supports them through the insurer's own formal internal complaints process first. If that doesn't work, they may then support an escalation to the Financial Ombudsman Service, the FOS.
The FOS.
Yeah, the FOS is the independent body that reviews these unresolved complaints. The advisor acts as a steady hand, helping the client compile all the information they need to present their case.
Let's talk about the long game of support. Once the technical process is winding down and a payout is approved, the advisor's role shifts again. Our sources note that policies are, mathematical structures, but the claim is a human experience.
Hmm. And that professional care has to continue far beyond the payment date.
Hmm.
The advisor really shifts from claims management to crisis management and long-term planning.
Right.
Clients who get a large life cover lump sum are suddenly facing huge decisions about asset protection, debt clearance, tax implications, especially if the policy wasn't held in a trust.
That guidance on how to integrate that lump sum into their wider financial life must be crucial. They need immediate help with budgeting, maybe investment strategy.
Precisely. And for someone who's received a critical illness payment, the guidance moves towards managing their new circumstances. It could be planning for reduced capacity to work or the significant costs of long-term care.
So you're revisiting the entire financial plan.
You have to. You have to reflect the new reality of the client's income and their health.
And income protection claims, as we said, require monitoring for years, potentially.
That is perhaps the most unique aspect. IP requires the advisor to stay engaged almost indefinitely. They support the periodic benefit reviews, they manage the admin of potential transition back to work, and they often help the client engage with insurer-funded rehab programs.
That's a real long-term commitment.
It is. It demonstrates that professional commitment to the client's overall financial and really their occupational well-being.
If we look back at this entire cycle, our sources note that claims experience is just. It's huge for an advisor's professional development. Every single claim teaches you something critical.
It absolutely does. When you analyze claim outcomes, you get this unparalleled insight into which underwriting questions really matter, which policy wordings are the clearest, and frankly, which insurers are best at claims management.
So it sharpens your advice for the next client.
Immeasurably. You learn how to select products that will reliably pay out when your next client is in that moment of need.
So what does this all mean for you? This deep dive really shows that assurance becomes reality the moment a claim is filed. The claim is where advice becomes truly, truly meaningful. It proves that protection is fundamentally about securing a person's future, not just about selling a product.
And if the end outcome of a successful claim is really defined by the quality of the upfront underwriting and the specificity of those policy definitions, which our sources all confirm, then here's a final thought. How might understanding the difference between, say, an own occupation and an any occupation definition before you even apply? How might that change the type of policy you select or the detail you demand from your original application? That concept, that the success of the payout is rooted entirely in the diligence of the preparation, that's a powerful idea to mull over.